You know exactly what you need to do to become fluent in a new language. I mean, you have the textbooks sitting right on your
Oh,
desk.
yeah. The apps are downloaded.
Right. You have a quiet room.
Yeah.
So why are you sitting there right now staring at a 30-second video of a cat falling off a table instead of actually studying?
It is entirely universal.
It really is. And today, we are diagnosing the exact moment human self-control just, well, it breaks down. Welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here.
We're working from a really fascinating piece of source material today. It's a conversation transcript originally aimed at language learners, breaking down the psychology of why we avoid studying.
Which is such a massive hurdle.
Definitely. Our mission for this quick, impactful 15-minute deep dive is to take that transcript, decode the underlying mechanics of self-control, and map out exactly how beginners can build unshakable self-discipline habits.
Yes.
We want to drastically improve your English learning efficiency.
And, it is such a crucial area to explore because there is this profound misconception out there about how language acquisition actually works.
Yeah.
People tend to think fluency is simply a matter of intellect or some natural talent. But when you strip away the grammar and the vocabulary, learning a language is fundamentally an exercise in behavior management.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. The source material does a brilliant job of dismantling the illusion that some people are just born with this magical, endless reservoir of willpower.
While the rest of us are biologically doomed to scroll through social media forever, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely. And right off the bat, if you are listening to this and feeling that deep, lingering guilt because you haven't opened your English book in like 3 weeks, we see you.
It happens to everyone.
The struggle to find the time, or more accurately, the mental energy to study, it's practically universal. The magnetic pull between choosing to do the hard work of learning English and doing literally anything else is just incredibly powerful.
It really is.
But we aren't framing self-control as some rare genetic gift today. Instead, we are looking at it as a muscle.
I like that.
Yeah, it's a biological mechanism that can be fatigue, yes, but more importantly, it can be systematically trained and strengthened.
The muscle metaphor is incredibly apt, honestly, because it forces us to look at the physical and neurological reality of the situation.
Okay.
We had to establish a foundational premise before we talk about study hacks or habits, which is that our brains are biologically hardwired for immediate gratification.
Right, of course.
That is the default setting of the human operating system. For hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, our ancestors survived by seeking out immediate calories, immediate safety.
Immediate comfort.
Exactly. The brain doesn't naturally care about a long-term abstract goal like becoming fluent in English 5 years from now.
Yeah, 5 years is a long time for the brain.
It cares about what feels good right in this exact second. Understanding that biological reality is the absolute first step to mastering a new language.
Because you realize you are fighting millions of years of evolutionary programming.
Precisely.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this is where the conflict really begins, I think. We have this fundamental battle happening inside our heads every single day, and it's essentially a war between different time frames.
Yes.
On one side, you have these immediate short-term feelings. It's that impulsive, instinctual voicing, I want sugar right now, or I just want to watch something entertaining and turn my brain off.
We all hear that voice.
We really do. And on the opposing side, you have your executive function holding on to these abstract long-term goals. The desire to be healthy, to advance your career, or in this context, the desire to truly learn English and converse fluently.
Exactly. It's the friction between the easy reward and the slow reward. Human neurobiology relies heavily on dopamine, a neurotransmitter that drives us to seek out reward.
A feel-good chemical.
Right. So when you pick up your smartphone and open an app, you are instantly hit with novel stimuli, bright colors, moving images, social
The
validation.
likes, the comments.
Yeah, your brain receives a rapid, frictionless spike of dopamine. That is the ultimate easy reward.
Yeah.
But studying English,
Not so easy.
that is the definition of a slow reward. I mean, you can sit down, study complex grammar structures for 2 straight hours, and you do not suddenly become fluent.
Sadly, no.
There is no immediate payoff. The actual reward, the ability to speak effortlessly, is months, if not years, down the line.
It's an incredibly asymmetrical battle. The smartphone offers a massive dopamine hit for zero effort, while the English textbook offers almost zero immediate dopamine for a massive amount of cognitive effort.
Right.
No wonder we all struggle.
And because that battle is so heavily skewed against us,
Mhm.
we tend to rely on a deeply flawed strategy, which is motivation.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, we convince ourselves that we just need to feel motivated to study. But the source material makes a vital distinction here that every beginner needs to internalize.
Okay, what is it?
It draws a hard line between motivation and discipline. Motivation is nothing more than an emotional state. It's a feeling. And what happens to
We
feelings?
fluctuate.
Exactly, they come and go. The source actually compares relying on motivation to relying on the weather.
Which is such a brilliant way to frame it, because if you think about it, relying on motivation to learn English is like waiting for a perfectly sunny 75-degree day with a light breeze to commute to your job.
Yes.
If you only went to work on days where the weather was absolutely flawless, you would end up getting fired by the end of the month.
You definitely would.
You'd wake up, see some rain clouds, and say, I don't feel motivated by this weather. I'll just stay in bed today.
Right.
You don't go to work because you feel a profound emotional inspiration to sit in traffic. You go because you made a commitment. You have a job to do, and you do it regardless of the external conditions.
That's discipline.
Yet when it comes to studying English, we constantly look out our internal mental window, see that we aren't feeling 100% inspired, and we just call in sick.
Precisely. We wait for the emotional weather to be perfect, and when it isn't, we procrastinate. And procrastination is really just a psychological mechanism for prioritizing the present over the future.
Wow.
We say to ourselves, I will definitely study tomorrow when I feel more energized. But of course, tomorrow is a fantasy. It's a conceptual dumping ground for all the difficult tasks we don't want to do today.
It's essentially a coping mechanism. We are telling ourselves these elaborate little lies to feel better in the present moment.
Yeah.
We soothe our own anxiety about not studying by promising that our future selves will somehow possess a superhuman level of discipline that our present selves completely lack.
It's so true.
We imagine future us as this incredibly focused, tireless scholar, when in reality, future us is going to be exactly as tired and distracted as present us.
What's fascinating here is how we break that cycle of self-deception. The solution presented isn't to try and artificially manufacture more motivation.
Because you can't.
Right. It comes down to a profound, almost uncomfortable level of deep honesty. True self-control requires you to strip away the rationalizations.
Okay.
It means looking at your textbook, looking at your phone, and admitting to yourself, I am avoiding this work because it is hard.
Wow. Not because I don't have time.
Exactly. It's not because you are too busy. It's not because you need to wait for the perfect study playlist. It is simply because the cognitive effort required to learn new vocabulary is difficult, and your brain is actively searching for an easier path.
That is a very raw level of self-reflection. Admitting, I am avoiding this because it is hard, removes all the padding we put around our bad habits. It forces you to confront the reality of the situation without any excuses.
And that confrontation is necessary, because once you are honest about why you are avoiding the task, you can stop relying on the fantasy that motivation will suddenly arrive to save you.
Yeah.
You stop trying to manipulate your feelings and start dealing with the mechanical reality of building discipline. Discipline fundamentally is about honoring a commitment.
Doing what you said you'd do.
It means staying true to your word, especially when the emotional desire to do the work has completely evaporated.
So if motivation is completely unreliable, we're left with a mechanical problem. How do we start the engine when the battery is dead?
Right.
How does a beginner actually sit down and learn English when their brain is actively screaming for the easy fun of social media or television?
That's a great question.
The secret isn't white-knuckling it. It's not about gripping the edge of the desk, sweating, and using sheer brute force willpower to resist temptation.
No, that strategy almost always fails.
Instead, it's about redesigning our environment and our expectations.
This brings us to the core practical application of self-control. We have to engineer our physical surroundings to bypass the need for sheer willpower entirely.
Okay. How?
The source text highlights a classic, highly effective environmental engineering tactic based on a well-known English idiom, out of sight, out of mind.
Out of sight, out of mind. It sounds so simple, almost like a cliche, but the neurological reality behind it is massive.
It is.
Think about how much of our brain is dedicated simply to processing visual information. If you are trying to read an English grammar chapter and your smartphone is sitting right there on the desk next to your book, even if it's turned off, it is a visual cue.
Absolutely.
It represents infinite entertainment.
Exactly. And because it's in your visual field, Your brain is forced to continuously run a subconscious calculation.
Oh, wow.
It's constantly evaluating the high-friction task of studying against the low-friction reward of the phone. You are forcing your brain to use its very limited, very metabolically expensive willpower muscle to repeatedly say no to the device, second after second, minute after minute.
It's like having a delicious, freshly baked chocolate chip cookie sitting on a plate right under your nose while you try to eat a bowl of plain broccoli.
Great analogy.
You might resist the cookie for the first 5 minutes. You might even resist it for 10 minutes.
Yeah,
But eventually, that willpower muscle fatigues.
it always does.
You tell yourself, I'll just check one notification, just one. And suddenly, you've fallen down an algorithmic rabbit hole. 2 hours have passed, and you haven't learned a single new English word.
We've all been there.
So the crucial, non-negotiable first step isn't to try harder. It's to physically alter the environment. You take the phone, and you place it in a completely different room. You put it out of sight so it is removed from the cognitive processing of your mind.
By doing that, you eliminate the friction of distraction.
Yeah.
You aren't resisting temptation.
Yeah.
You are removing it from the equation entirely.
Right.
But clearing away the distractions is only the first half of the strategy. The second half is building the automaticity of the desired behavior.
Yeah.
We want the act of studying to become a habit, an action we initiate, without needing a massive deliberation process.
And getting to that point of automaticity is where people really stumble. They clear their desk, put their phone in the other room, and then declare, I am now going to study English for 3 uninterrupted hours every single night.
Which is a terrible idea.
Which lasts for exactly 2 days before they burn out completely. But the strategy highlighted in our source material proposes the exact opposite approach.
It does.
It introduces the concept of the small win. The methodology is to start with just 5 minutes of English study a day. Not an hour, not 30 minutes, just 5 minutes.
Right.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because I have to play the skeptic for a second. If I am listening to this, and my goal is to actually become fluent in English, to hold conversations, to conduct business in a new language, is 5 minutes of studying a day really going to do anything?
I hear that all the time.
It sounds almost comically insufficient. It feels like trying to empty a swimming pool with a teaspoon. Isn't this just a way to trick ourselves into feeling productive without actually doing the hard work?
It's a completely natural skepticism, and mathematically you are correct. 5 minutes of studying is not enough volume to achieve fluency in any reasonable time frame. But if we connect this to the bigger picture of behavioral psychology, we see that the goal of the 5-minute rule isn't about the volume of information acquired on day one.
Okay.
It is not about mastering the past perfect tense in 300 seconds. The sole purpose of the 5-minute rule is to overcome what psychologists call activation energy.
Activation energy, like in chemistry, the minimum amount of energy required to start a reaction.
Exactly. In behavioral terms, it is the friction of simply getting started. Remember, we've already established that the brain perceives studying as difficult and metabolically expensive.
Yes.
When you set a goal to study for 2 hours, your brain looks at that massive mountain of effort and immediately triggers an avoidance response. It feels too overwhelming, so you procrastinate.
Yeah.
But 5 minutes. 5 minutes is a remarkably low threshold. It is almost embarrassingly easy to say yes to. It completely disarms your brain's natural defense mechanisms against hard work.
Ah, so it's like a neurological Trojan horse. You are sneaking the study session past the amygdala's threat detection system.
That's a great way to put it.
You are telling your brain, don't worry, we are only going to look at this book for 5 tiny minutes, and then we can stop. It lowers the bar so drastically that failure becomes almost impossible.
And that impossibility of failure is the key. When you successfully complete those 5 minutes, you achieve that small win. You get a localized, immediate sense of accomplishment.
You feel good about it.
Right. You begin to shift your internal identity from someone who procrastinates learning English to someone who studies English every single day.
Wow.
You start building behavioral momentum. Once the action of sitting down at your desk, opening the book, and focusing for just 5 minutes becomes an automatic, ingrained habit, the internal resistance evaporates. Your brain literally stops arguing with you about whether or not to study.
Because it's no longer a massive decision that requires a board meeting in your head. It's just the thing you do at 7 p.m. after dinner.
Exactly.
You are building the structural foundation, the highway first. Once that highway of habit is paved and sturdy, then you can worry about increasing the speed of the cars. You can easily scale up from 5 minutes to 15, then to 30, because the hardest part, the friction of starting, has already been neutralized.
Precisely. You establish the neural pathway first, and you load it with volume later. But establishing that pathway requires consistency. And this brings us to the inevitable reality of human behavior failure.
The dreaded failure.
Right. No matter how perfectly you design your environment, no matter how small you make your initial wins, life is unpredictable. You will inevitably get sick, or have to work late, or simply feel exhausted, and you will break your perfect streak of daily study.
And that exact moment, the moment the streak is broken, is the breaking point for almost everyone. This is where perfectionism rears its ugly head and completely sabotages the entire process.
It really does.
But our source material addresses this phenomenon with one of the most brilliant, visually striking analogies I've ever come across. They call it the flat tire rule.
It's a masterful way to reframe localized failure. The scenario is simple. Imagine you're driving your car down the highway, and suddenly you run over a nail and get a flat tire.
Okay.
It's frustrating. It delays your journey. But what do you do next? Do you get out of the car, look at the one flat tire, become so enraged that you take out a knife and deliberately slash the other three perfectly good tires?
It's completely absurd. If you saw someone on the side of the road slashing their own tires because they got a flat, you would think they had lost their minds.
You definitely would.
And yet, this is precisely the psychological script we run when we are trying to build discipline. If we commit to studying English every day and we miss one Tuesday because life got chaotic, what do?
We give up.
We say, well, I ruined my perfect streak. The whole week is ruined. Might as well not study on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday either. I'll just start over again next Monday.
Yeah.
We miss one day, we get one flat tire, and we immediately slash the other 3 tires. We burn the whole system to the ground because it wasn't flawless.
Psychologists refer to this as the abstinence violation effect. It's the phenomenon where a minor lapse in a strict regimen causes an individual to completely abandon the regimen altogether.
Oh, wow.
It's rooted in an all-or-nothing mindset. The ego is so attached to the idea of a perfect streak that once the perfection is broken, it seeks comfort in total rebellion.
So how do we combat that? How do we fix the flat without destroying the car?
By decoupling our progress from the concept of perfection. The lesson of the flat tire rule is profound in its pragmatism. If you miss one day of studying English, it is not a systemic failure of your character. It is merely a localized logistical error.
A minor bump in the road.
Exactly. You don't need to punish yourself, and you certainly don't need to abandon the rest of the week. You simply acknowledge the mistake, patch the tire, and as the text advocates, you get back on track immediately.
Get back on track.
The next day, you sit down for your 5 minutes as if nothing happened. You return to the baseline habit without the baggage of guilt.
It's about cultivating resilience rather than rigidity. But to truly understand why we veer off track in the first place, we have to look beneath the psychological surface.
Yes, we do.
And this is where the conversation gets incredibly deep, because our source material transitions from behavioral tricks into the raw biology of self-control. It highlights a truth that is frequently ignored in the self-help world.
Which is?
Our mental willpower does not exist in a vacuum.
Oh.
It is deeply, fundamentally tethered to our physiological state.
This is perhaps the most critical insight for any learner. We tend to treat our minds and our bodies as two separate entities, assuming we can just force our brain to focus regardless of how our body feels.
Right.
But the reality is that the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for complex planning, long-term goals, and suppressing impulses, is incredibly sensitive to physiological distress.
And the source material illustrates this beautifully by bringing up a very modern, very relatable English portmanteau.
Hangry.
Yes, hangry. A combination of hungry and angry. It's that highly irritable state you enter when your blood sugar drops too low and you suddenly find yourself snapping at people over incredibly minor inconveniences.
The biology of being hangry is a perfect case study in how the body dictates the mind. When your blood glucose levels drop significantly, your brain perceives it as a severe survival threat.
Oh, wow.
It doesn't know you just skipped lunch because you were busy. It assumes you were starving in the wilderness. To compensate, it triggers the release of growth hormones like adrenaline and cortisol to mobilize stored energy.
Which makes you jittery.
Yes. This cocktail of stress hormones naturally elevates your anxiety and aggression. Simultaneously, because glucose is low, the brain starts shutting down non-essential high-energy functions to conserve power.
And let me guess, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain we need to patiently conjugate English verbs and resist the urge to check our phones, is the first thing to get powered down.
Exactly. Executive function is metabolically expensive. So Your prefrontal cortex dims, and your amygdala, the primitive emotional reactive center of the brain, takes over.
Wow.
When you are in that state, emotional self-control isn't just difficult from a neurobiological standpoint, it is severely impaired.
Mhm.
Trying to force yourself to study complex English grammar when your body is sounding a biological alarm is an exercise in futility.
It makes perfect biological sense. So when we find ourselves in that reactive state, whether it's driven by hunger, anger, or even just an intense, impulsive desire to abandon our work and do something fun, what is the intervention?
We need a circuit breaker.
Right. The source material offers a surprisingly simple biological circuit breaker. Pause. Stop what you're doing, take one deep breath, and count to 10. It sounds like advice you'd give a kindergartner, but there's actual science behind why that works, isn't there?
Absolutely. It is not just a quaint cliche, it is a rapid physiological intervention. When you take a slow, deep breath, you stimulate the vagus nerve, which runs from your brain down through your abdomen.
Vagus nerve. Okay.
Stimulating the vagus nerve actively engages the parasympathetic nervous system, which is your body's rest and digest mode. This counters the fight-or-flight stress response.
Oh, that makes sense.
Taking that breath and forcing your brain to sequence numbers from 1 to 10 forces a shift in blood flow away from the reactive amygdala and back toward the logical prefrontal cortex. It literally buys your brain the few seconds it needs to reconnect the logic circuits before you make a purely emotional decision.
So what does this all mean in a broader context? It means that managing our impulses requires us to deliberately create space between the trigger and the reaction.
Yes.
And the source actually draws a really brilliant parallel here between learning discipline and financial discipline. It mentions the 24-hour rule for impulse purchases.
I love this rule.
If you see something online that you want to buy, say a pair of expensive shoes, you don't buy it immediately. You force yourself to wait 24 hours. And almost inevitably, when you check back the next day, the intense burning desire to buy that item has completely evaporated.
It really does.
The emotion has passed, the prefrontal cortex is back online, and you can make a rational decision. That exact same principle of creating a gap, whether it's a 10-second gap of breathing or 24-hour gap of waiting, applies perfectly to our study habits. It's about disrupting the automaticity of the bad impulse.
It is a powerful tool for localized impulse control. However, this raises an incredibly important structural question. If taking a deep breath or waiting 24 hours can help us navigate a sudden impulse, what happens when our baseline physiological state is fundamentally compromised from the moment we wake up?
Right.
The text explores how chronic factors, specifically lack of sleep and high levels of stress, completely hijack our baseline capacity for self-control.
This is the part that I think people really need to hear, because we operate in a culture that often glorifies exhaustion. We think that sleeping less so we can study more is a badge of honor.
It's actually counterproductive.
Exactly. The science shows that when we are sleep deprived, our brain actively begins to hunt for quick, low-friction energy. It literally alters our cravings, making us seek out sugar, junk food, and easy hits of dopamine.
The mechanism here is profound. A sleep-deprived brain is quite literally an impaired brain. During deep sleep, the glymphatic system flushes neurotoxins out of the brain.
Okay.
When you cut that process short, you wake up with an accumulation of metabolic waste. Furthermore, sleep deprivation drastically reduces connectivity between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex.
So the bridge is broken.
Exactly. Your emotional control center becomes hyper-reactive, up to 60% more reactive according to some studies, while the logical control center is dampened.
Which means your brain is operating purely on short-term survival mode. It lacks the physical battery power to care about a long-term goal like learning a language. It just wants the immediate comfort of scrolling on a smartphone because that requires zero cognitive effort.
Yes. The text essentially positions getting 8 hours of sleep as the ultimate foundational requirement for discipline. Trying to build self-control while chronically sleep-deprived is like trying to build a house on quicksand.
Wow.
The easiest, most biologically effective way to become a better, more focused English learner isn't to download a new flashcard app or buy a different textbook. It is simply to go to bed earlier. By prioritizing sleep, you are ensuring that the biological engine required to exert self-control is fully fueled and operational.
That is such a vital reframing, and it applies equally to chronic stress. The source points out that when we are under immense stress, whether from work, relationships, or financial pressure, self-control is almost always the first casualty.
Without a doubt.
You come home after a brutally stressful day, and the idea of sitting down to study English grammar is physically repulsive. You just want to order fast food, collapse on the couch, and stare at a screen to escape the pressure.
Yeah.
Stress, as the text beautifully articulates, forces you out of the driver's seat of your own life.
That metaphor of the driver's seat perfectly encapsulates executive function. When you are calm and rested, your prefrontal cortex has its hands on the steering wheel. You are directing your actions toward your long-term goals.
Right.
But chronic stress floods your system with cortisol. Prolonged exposure to cortisol actually alters the neural architecture of the brain, shrinking the prefrontal cortex and enlarging the amygdala.
It changes the physical shape of the brain.
It does. It biologically shifts control from the deliberate, thoughtful parts of the brain to the primitive, habit-driven parts. When you are stressed, the impulse takes over the wheel. Therefore, actively managing your stress levels and ensuring you are physically rested isn't a luxury. It is a strict biological prerequisite for learning.
Don't let the stress drive the car. You stay in the driver's seat. That is a visual I will absolutely be taking with me. We want to be the ones actively navigating our journey toward English fluency, not being driven off a cliff by our own unmanaged exhaustion.
Exactly. And that requires a holistic approach. You cannot separate the mind that is trying to learn the language from the body that is housing it.
Wow. We have really traversed an incredible landscape today. Let's pull all these threads together and summarize exactly what this means for you, the listener, as you tackle your English learning journey.
Sounds good.
We started by looking at the raw mechanics of self-control, and we discovered that it's far more about strategy and biology than it is about moral fortitude. First, remember the power of environmental engineering. Out of sight, out of mind.
Put that phone in another room.
Exactly. If your phone or your television or any other distraction is visible, it is draining your cognitive battery. Eliminate the friction of having to constantly say no.
Second, respect your biology. Remember what it means to be hangry.
Hungry and angry.
Right. Your physical state absolutely dictates your mental state. Do not try to force a complex study session when your body is screaming for food, sleep, or a moment to breathe. Acknowledge your physiological needs first.
And third, when the inevitable happens and you mess up when you miss a day, or even a week of studying, remember the flat tire rule, do not slash the other 3 tires in a fit of perfectionism.
Don't do it.
Don't ruin the entire month just because you missed one session. Simply patch the tire, give yourself some grace, and get right back on track the very next day.
The overarching formula for success here is incredibly clear. Stop waiting for motivation to strike, because motivation is as unreliable as the weather. Clear away the visual and physical distractions to protect your focus.
Right.
And most importantly, commit to the small win of just 5 minutes a day. Lower the bar so much that starting is effortless, and let the automaticity of the habit carry you forward.
And as you build those habits, remember to actually celebrate your progress. The brain thrives on positive reinforcement. Look at how far you've come, not just the massive mountain you still have to climb.
Absolutely.
Every single 5-minute session where you sat down and honored your commitment to yourself is a profound victory.
It really is. It's the accumulation of those tiny victories that ultimately wires the brain for fluency.
But before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over on your own. We spend so much time in our modern culture trying to optimize ourselves, trying to push harder, grind longer, and force our brains to absorb more information.
Yeah, the hustle culture.
But based on the deep biological connections we just uncovered today, the reality that our self-control, our executive function, and our ultimate ability to learn a complex language are entirely dependent on having a well-rested, low-stress physiological baseline. Is it possible that the secret to finally achieving fluency in English isn't actually about pushing yourself harder? Is it possible that the missing ingredient in your study routine is actually giving yourself the permission to radically, unapologetically rest? It's something to think about the next time you feel guilty for taking a break. Keep building those habits, keep fixing those flat tires, and we'll see you next time.